7 Immortals: Elvis, Janis, Cobain, Hendrix, Morrison, Garcia, and Lennon. We're taking your calls at 866-482-1011. You know, listen, a lot of celebrities, actors have certain kind of pressures, and rock stars have they have fans that demand the next best thing. They got to come up with something revolutionary, as David wrote about in his book. But so many times it's just hits, and they don't have time really to do a decent album. They do the best they can, and it's the pressure. Interesting background. 866-482-1011. 866-482-1011. There's an interesting background right before the break that you painted there with Courtney Love. It brings back a lot of memories for me because, as I said, the pressure to not have Kurt Cobain on, she had a lot of power at that time. She owned that, she had his money, basically, and she had a fairly successful band going at the time, I suppose, and she wanted, she didn't want anything to interfere with that. And so how was she able to get that much clout from the industry? Why did they give her so much respect?
Well, Courtney's a very intimidating person. Many people are very fearful of her. I mean, she's daunting, and she's in your face, unlike most other people. And I think it was just that whole thing that she had going. And of course, her power was all the more because Kurt was, they were married. On the other end, it's strange. Kurt was a very shy, retiring guy, and he was never that assertive. And she abused him unmercifully, just tongue lashed him for being a nobody and a loser. I mean, he's the biggest rock and roll star in the country, and he just cows to this, and ultimately he simply couldn't take it anymore. There's a good deal more involved there, infidelities, say with Billy Corgan. I mean, that played a lot into it, but there are all sorts of sidelights here.
And she would talk to him this way? I mean, what gave her the confidence and attitude to talk to Kurt that way? Her, of all people. Why did she feel...
Well, she thought she was certainly his equal, if not his superior artistically. And there was a malevolent jealousy, going on here. I mean, why did you get it all? I mean, she had been paying her dues for many more years than Kurt had. Kurt, he paid his dues for maybe a year and a half or something like that, and then this fell into his lap. And she felt incredibly resentful that she'd been, as far as selling her body, as far as being a groupie, as far as doing everything she possibly could, and she didn't even get close to that, and she was intensely resentful.
Yeah, she just disgusts me. In the end, it actually worked out good for me. But for the short term, what she did was the manager who just took her over happened to be a fairly good friend of mine. Oh. And he actually is a very good friend. I just never really see him. He's, he used to manage Def Leppard. He manages Metallica and a bunch of bands, Muse. Yeah. And at the time, I wanted to get Metallica on, I guess it was. And he said to me one day, and this is where I knew I had a problem, he said, and usually it's like, hey, sure, man, when do you want to do it, blah, blah, blah. And this one time he said, well, Alan, I'm going to have to pass this time.
No kidding.
And I said, yeah, and I said, well, why? And he said, well, you had Tom Grant on your show, didn't you? Uh-huh. Yeah, well, I'm handling Courtney Love right now, and I think we're just going to pass right now. But... To come full circle, less than about maybe 2.5, 3 years down the road, I have another chat with him, and it was essentially, oh man, you were right. Basically, he understood. He understood what he had to deal with because he worked with her. Yeah. So anyway, make a long story short, everything's cool now, and I work with him and still have access to the bands I want. So there's everything worked out.
The people who continue to work with her and are friends, I wonder what they think. I mean, they've certainly heard the conspiracy allegations, and maybe ultimately they don't think they have merit, but how are they rationalizing this? I'm thinking of Michael Stipe in particular. I mean, a very thoughtful, reasonable guy, and he's good friends with her. What does he think of it, I mean, he was good friends with Kurt. They were probably going to do an album. That was Kurt's probable next project.
All right, 866-482-1011, and you can go to twitter.com. Just look for If It Rocks. You can go to Facebook. We'll read those tweets. 866-482-1011. Not only about Kurt Cobain, Elvis Presley, John Lennon, Morrison, Hendrix, everybody. Garcia. Let's go to Mike, line 1. Good to have you on, Mike.
Yeah, I have a question. I'd like to know how John Lennon fits into the mix. First of all, he doesn't seem to bear the same tragic characteristics as the remainder of the group. And secondly, although I didn't bring it up, changing the subject a little bit, I've also heard that it's a little bit overstated in terms of Jimi Hendrix being a tragic personality as well, and that he was actually a happy-go-lucky guy who just got, unfortunately, one evening caught up into a bad mix of substances. Thanks.
Well, let's do Hendrix quickly, and then maybe we can touch on it later. No, I mean, the guy tried to commit suicide twice. Not a happy-go-lucky guy. And of course, his song "Manic Depression," he was a manic depressive, and a few of the others were too. And he would go from the Mariana Trench to Everest inside a few minutes, and so really bipolar guy. And he was miserable because he was between a rock and a hard place. I mean, his manager, a guy named Mike Jeffrey, was a maniac. And again, we're getting into conspiracy territory. His death was very mysterious. Most people think he just aspirated on his vomit. No, he didn't. He was, according to the coroner over in London, and it was revealed about a year later, he was literally drowned in red wine. That is to say, he had taken the Seconal, somebody opened his mouth and started pouring red wine in, like quarts. He was already posthumous when he got to the hospital. They thought they might be able to bring him down. They were using basically turkey basters to empty his stomach, and it wouldn't empty of all the red wine that was in there. Now, could he have done that? No. I mean, the short answer is he didn't lead a particularly happy life. But of course, that said, he had some breathless highs. Professional and personal. And getting back to the Lennon thing, that's a good question. I wanted to address that because, I mean, you think, okay, he was gunned down by a maniac in the street. Well, quite true enough. But if you look into his background at the time, Yoko Ono was about to divorce him. It's pretty well established that she was. Now, if you go back to 74 when she was on the cusp of divorcing him, what they called the Lost Weekend when he was out in L.A., he said himself, and he told his friends, I was basically playing Russian roulette with alcohol and with narcotics with the biggest dopers in the industry, Keith Moon and Ringo Starr and Nielsen. And he said it was a matter of who was going to die first. And it was all because of being away from Yoko. Yoko was his absolute lifeline. He couldn't take it. And so now, fast forward to 1980. She's about to divorce him. He hasn't been told this yet, but it seems almost certain. Had she divorced him, I'm sure he would have gone into a major tailspin again, and he could very well have not committed suicide, but had one of these narcotic type accidents, if you want to call them, like the others did, because he was a very self-destructive guy too.
I did not know that she was going to. I mean, I didn't even think there was. I mean,
while he was down. Get back to the chronology here. He had been, the house husband period in the Dakota, right? This was like 5 years or something like that. Yeah. Now, Yoko and John, especially John, they kited this as, the house husband period, where he was retiring, he was getting off the merry-go-round, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not really true. He was creatively dead. He was very disappointed in the albums he had done prior to then. He said, quote, "so well," and "all things must pass" from Harrison. He felt eclipsed by that, and he was just, he was in a pretty bad place. So ultimately, when the house husband period ended, he decided, he came from a long line of seafaring people, his old man and stuff like that. They were in the merchant marine, and he thought, well, what a gas it would be to go out on a boat into the high seas. I mean, this is an intellectual popster, going out into the high seas and facing this. But anyway, he did. And Yoko orchestrated, as she did, the trip for him with her psychic directionalists and her tarot people. She